It's March 1st, 2024, and the threat of significant cold damage is now over at my place. So I wanted to have a walk around and show you the effects of, well, we really only got one cold week this winter. This is my weather station, and there was a week back in early January where it recorded 9 straight nights of freezing and below with a low of 29 and 3 nights, a low of 27 and 3 nights with a low of 29. And there was a bunch of frost. And it was fairly cold. Let's see what the results were. These younger trees here, I protected them with frost blankets, and essentially everywhere a frost blanket touched the canopy, they got burned back. This is a little Gwen. I really don't like frost blankets. This is a green gold. I would prefer putting some type of roof over a tree. I'll show you the results of some trees that had that. So these little trees, they didn't have frost blankets, but rather I just put cages around them, and I had boards, like pieces of plywood over the top. And they did better. And I've found this over the years, that a beach umbrella, a board, something like that, it works better than a frost blanket. If you can keep a roof overhead and keep it from touching the canopy, then it's just more effective. However, it's not perfectly effective for every tree. This is a little Carman tree, and as you might know, Carmans are a peculiar variety where they try to grow and bloom in the late summer and fall, which really puts them in a vulnerable spot if it gets cold in the winter, or in my case, it gets cold every winter here, and so they're likely to get damaged. So I had a roof over this little tree, but all of its fresh little leaves still got burned back. Not a big deal, but it's just a little bit of a waste of energy for the tree. I would prefer a variety that, in a climate like this, a variety that just stays dormant come late fall and waits until now to start growing. Which reminds me of Mexicola. I don't have a full tree of Mexicola, but I have just a graft on one of my trees. You know, Mexicola is a variety that's tough in the cold. It can take quite a bit of cold, but it also, sorry, it's a bit shady, but it also blooms very early compared to other varieties. And the problem with that is, I mean, it'll start blooming in January, February, and if you're in a cold climate, well, you're going to still be cold in January, February, and you're going to lose a lot of those flowers. So, you know, Mexicola in some ways is good for a colder climate, but the fact that it flowers so early is actually a problem, because you end up losing a lot of those flowers. You just hope that you have still plenty of bloom left when it warms up in whatever, March, April. That makes me think of reed. This is a reed tree. Now, reed's foliage is relatively sensitive to the cold compared to Mexicola. I mean, you can see some of the cold damage here, and there's even a little dieback over here. On the other hand, in a just kind of like a marginal climate like I'm in, where it doesn't get too cold every winter, it's not something where you need Mexicola to just get your tree to stay alive through the winter. It just gets cold enough to get some damage. What's awesome about reed in a climate like this is, sure, you might get a little damage to some of the leaves in a, you know, a 27-degree night. But the variety does not try to flower until very late. This is the latest flowering of all the varieties I have. And so when it does flower, there's no chance of cold damage anymore. The spring weather is very warm and you're going to get tons of awesome pollination. Reed never has a problem with pollination, ever, even in the coldest of springs. In fact, I'll just show you. Last spring was one of the coldest we had, at least in recent memory. There were problems with fruit set on a lot of other trees, not the reed. I mean, this thing is still just loaded because it's still flowering in June. Even July 1st, you'll find some flowers on it. So never a pollination problem with reed. Just to observe a varietal difference, this little tree on the right is a Helen, and the larger one next to it is a lamb. The lamb essentially has no cold damage, but the Helen has some. There's some diebacks on some limbs. I mean, it is in a slightly colder spot, but I'd say very slightly. I think, especially after having observed this tree for 5-6 years, it's a pretty sensitive tree to the cold. I wouldn't plant it if you're in a cold location. It's also a bee flower type, so it doesn't really want to set fruit in cold spring days or cold spring nights. Just to make a note on Hass, since it's such a good and common variety, 27 degrees one night, 29 degrees 3 or 4 nights, it really has no significant effect on Hass. You can see there's a little bit of mottling on the leaves. Big deal, not a problem. It's starting to show some early bloom. Let me go over to the other side to show you that. Here come the flowers. As you can see, there's really no effect on the flowers. So that kind of temperature is really not a problem with a mature Hass like this. Now, in contrast to my comments on Helen being pretty weak in the cold, this is a variety called NOLS, N-O-W-E-L-S. It has shown itself to be really tough in the cold. It's got very little cold damage, a little bit of mottling. That's it, and the fruit is mighty tasty as well. I think I still have 1 or 2 left on here. Here's one. Good fruit and a pretty productive tree and takes the cold pretty well. I'm liking this variety. I'll just wrap up by having a look at this Pinkerton tree. It's behind the dead looking banana. That's what 27 degrees does to a banana. But the Pinkerton tree is, as you can see, it's next to a large boulder and also the house. So it's in a relatively warm spot. Doesn't get really cold damage, but you know, Pinkerton can flower really early, as this one did this year. Like Carman, like Mexicola even. Not good. It just wasted a bunch of flowers, you know. It's like they either didn't set fruit or a lot of them got damaged in the cold, actually killed. And so, you know, it's going to be okay. The bees are on it today, and it'll have enough flowers left to set a good crop at this point, but it still would be a lot better in a warmer environment, maybe lower elevation. I'm like 1,500 feet or closer to the ocean. That would be a better environment for a tree like Pinkerton or Carman. So yeah, there you go.